Right, you're probably thinking, who is this grinning idiot? I often have this question too, so I decided to help you find out about me by doing the one thing you should never do, which is I Googled myself. Andy Croll Nike is a recruiter for Nike Portland. Andy Croller is actually Anthony Croller, a world champion boxer who I'd never heard of. Andy Croll Glamorgan is a history professor at the University of South Wales. But if you write my name and click I feel lucky, you get my personal website, which means I'm Andy Croll from the internet, I win. So this is me on the right in 1982 with hair. I'm no one special. I'm a working designer and developer. I mostly write code every day. The only difference really is that I've unwisely been given the use of a microphone for half an hour. I do run a developer conference here in Brighton for Ruby programmers. Rather cleverly, I've called it Brighton Ruby. There's plenty for non-Rubyists and the Ruby curious to enjoy, but I did just lie, which is bad form, really. I lied about the only difference being the microphone, because I'm also shit hot at Keynote. Yeah, boom. So if you're looking for a talk deep in code, I am really, really sorry. There isn't any. I'm going to talk a little bit about the past, and then about the work that we all do. I hope you'll indulge me. So this is my friend Carl. I met him when I lived in Singapore. He was starting up a development agency out there. He is a huge part of me doing the sort of work that I do today. He influenced my professional thinking. He gave me the opportunity to work with him and his team. And he helped me get my first conference off the ground. He also pointed out the following conceit, which I have totally stolen for this talk. So this is the number of hours in the average human life. About 10 years ago, he worked out it's also roughly the number of pixels on one of these fabulously old school monitors. I have a more modern comparison. There are roughly as many pixels on a non-massive iPhone as there are hours in my life. So what does life look like as a phone screen of hours? That's sleep. This is mostly learning to talk and wipe your own bottom. I'm sorry, this is probably not, after the 4 years of emails, expected how this talk would go. 4 years of waiting, and it's a balding man talking about bodily functions. Anyway, this is school. That's university, if you go. I am roughly here, roughly. This barely, but still visible black dot is this evening. Nice. This larger block is the week of no sleep I had on the floor of a hospital where my twins were born. You can see here my daughter's already plotting to take over the world. These dots are the 5 years of my conference. And this sliver here is all 42 hours and 38 minutes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I first gave a version of this talk about 18 months ago. The number of hours has gone up 30% since I first made this slide. If it keeps going, this is going to challenge like basically anything I've ever done for any period of time in my whole life. And it's not like there isn't another 2 hours coming literally tomorrow, and then another 3 hours next month. And then people who've seen Infinity War there. The idea that life is short is not a new idea. 2,000 years ago, Seneca, a Roman philosopher, wrote, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy." You're probably a little freaked out right now, particularly if, like me, you have seen any Marvel films more than once. It is not going to get any better for a bit. I think of this as the first screen of my career in technology. I'm dating myself pretty specifically now, and you're right, I do look surprisingly youthful. This is 1989. This is the loading screen for a Commodore Amiga. They dropped the price in 1989, so my parents could afford to buy me one. They bundled it with a brutally difficult Batman game. And as much as we can all agree that Michael Keaton is the definitive on-screen Batman, that wasn't what grabbed my attention. Like, I don't know, it's quite a small room, and it's normally quite a small percentage. Who here knows what that sentence means? Brilliant, like 5, yeah, it's about 5%, that's about right. So Lucasfilm Games was an offshoot of Industrial Light and Magic. They were the special effects company formed when they made Star Wars. They turned into LucasArts. And they had this strong line in these fabulous point-and-click adventures. They're made by small teams, like strong personalities of creative people coming through them. And the writing was, it still holds up today. Like, you can get remastered versions of these on your phones or on your modern consoles. They really hold up today because it's about the storytelling, not necessarily like the particular mechanics at the time. But this one was my favorite. The game I loved was The Secret of Monkey Island. It came on 4 floppy disks when I got it. It had physical copy protection, which you had to literally spin, put the pirate faces together and enter a code from the code wheel. It had a real cardboard box that, as I recall, was about the size of a human chest. So what do you do with this enthusiasm that clearly I still have if you are a massive 15-year-old nerd? Let us take a trip back in time to the bedroom of a teenage boy. It's a risky moment, that, isn't it? You don't know what's coming. This is my first website. I managed to dig back into an old CD-ROM. It has table tags. It has image hovers. I cut all the images out myself. It does look a bit weird, though. 800 by 600 in IE4. I'll just reload it. Oh, bollocks. It probably needs a reboot. This is my cue to take a glass of water whilst I... Right, that's better. That's the desired resolution. It amazingly loads in modern Chrome. Now, this is the efforts of quite a lonely young man. How can you tell it's the late 90s? Web ring, another web ring, another web ring. Now, some of you will have worked in this industry long enough to remember that web rings were what we did before social media, sort of a pre-Google time when the internet was made of coal and steam. But sadly, this website, this work of unalloyed genius, burned too brightly and is lost to the internet forever. Sad animation. Years pass. I get a degree, I get a blue chip corporate job, and I lose it. I get a girlfriend, and despite the Monkey Island fan site, managed to keep her. We moved to Singapore. I changed careers from big corporate into websites I'd loved building as a teenager, working with my friend Carl, who we spoke about at the start, learning how to do engineering properly. Now, remember this movie. The guy on the left is the other Facebook guy, Eduardo Saverin, as played by the third best Spider-Man. A friend and I started business with the flatmate of that guy, who is not in the film. And given Eduardo was the money, also with him. So we built a bunch of apps. It was like a sort of technology lab, like throwing out ideas and products and stuff, trying to use Eduardo's connections and his notoriety at the time, and our design and development skills to see if we could build a successful business. It was going okay, I thought. We'd launched one thing a month for 4 or 5 months. We arranged to meet in a Starbucks to talk about, what next, where my co-founders surprised fired me. Over shit coffee. Rude. It seems things weren't moving fast enough for the flatmate who'd seen all of his friends get Facebook rich over the last few years. So by this point, I found out that any business relationship with a billionaire, the non-billionaire, it turns out, is the weaker partner. So I co-founded a travel startup doing flash sales for luxury hotels, roped in by a friend who was in the travel industry. We raised some sort of startup seed money. It was pretty easy at the time in Singapore, and we even had a business model, unusually for a startup. So the tech was awesome, the team was great. I've got text files on my computer that are full of funny conversations that we had. We solved interesting problems. We were one of the first companies to embrace responsive email. We had an iPhone app. We had a cool admin interface, and it spoke to the front end. There's only a couple of us building it. It was awesome. We even had some profitable months. But if any of you have worked in travel, you'll know that ads have to work, or you are shit out of luck. And unfortunately, yeah. Someone's still with me. This is nice. So when my wife and I returned to the UK, as Impulse Fly was winding up, I decided I'd do some contracting for a bit. I didn't want to be employed. I didn't fancy the VC startup world, and I was sick to death of travel websites. Which is how I ended up working full-time at HouseTrip, a VC-funded travel startup. It's very clear by this point I do not know what I am doing. It was a massively dysfunctional product environment. I joined a team of 4 people inside the engineering team rebuilding MailChimp, despite the fact that MailChimp existed. The wider team were terrified of the legacy code in the app and the pressure being put on them by the investors, the founders, and just like the pressure of being in that fairly awful world. The business was trying to raise more cash, throwing money on the Google bonfire, its travel, it didn't work, and their luck ran out. So 6 months into my employment there were layoffs, lots and lots of them. It was a pretty shitty fortnight. Half of engineering, 80% of design, 60% of the project managers. It's like 30 to 40 people were made redundant, all gone. But after this unfortunate event, something strange happened. Like the remaining product team started to gel. There was lots of pairing, lots of teaching, lots of learning. We stopped working crazy hours. We moved the product along in less time. I love the shit work of unpicking the past and refactoring an app to something smoother and sleeker. I like changing the wheels on a moving car as long as I'm doing it with a nice bunch of people. I've worked again with some of those folks, and we even keep an ex-employee Slack around because everybody needs another Slack to be logged into. I describe this period of house trip as crashing a plane into the runway. Like, rather than into the sea miles from the airport, you're sort of keeping the nose up on a failed VC experiment. But, we still crashed. So I'm thinking, maybe I should join the pantheon of tech writers. I'm hardly the first person to have made disappearing websites or products. Like, these are years and years of people's lives. I miss Google Reader. There's even a marvelous Tumblr from Phil Gifford. It republishes the cheery shutdown notices of failed companies as the remnants are savaged for parts and the people hired by Google or Facebook. The sites are abandoned and their users' data is gone. Well, unless it gets acquired by Facebook. Of course, not all bad things disappear. Anyone? No? T-shirts that show off your hot underarms? I mean, who thought that was a good idea? Dreadful Budweiser adverts, they go on forever. So, what have we learned here? Like, you can't force it. Adding money doesn't guarantee longevity. Don't drink coffee in Starbucks with billionaires. Having good design and engineering does not help. Like, it's not even the things we turn off or shut down. Like, we're constantly refreshing, redesigning, re-architecting. Like, our very work is often the destruction of the things we did last week. Like, links rot, code decays, and entropy wins. Thanks very much. No. So if it's not about the end result, given the shifting sands, like perhaps it's about the journey. So I set out to learn from the tech industry about success and making it. I've done a detailed analysis of every email I received from a recruiter in the last 18 months. And I'd like to share with you the scientifically derived average job in the tech industry. It's not just the rank and file, though, of course. Like, Steve Jobs famously wanted to put his dent in the universe, which sounds good, right? Making history, making a difference. Marissa Mayer, the former CEO of Yahoo, being there on the weekend is a huge indicator of success, mostly because these companies don't just happen. They happen because of really hard work. So, work all the hours. Got it. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. Glorious legacy, basically. And this is Travis, who until last year was the CEO of Uber, a startup which can best be described as the Uber of sexual harassment. Oh, Jesus. These people are all, in the nicest possible way, wildly foolish, including Steve Jobs. Sacrifice your health by working all hours as some sort of point of virtue. Run a company where the employees live in tents outside your warehouses. Treat people poorly in pursuit of some sort of nebulous success. And, this doesn't stop. Like, I've been guilty of some of these behaviors, like go big or go home, leave your mark on the world. But advice from successful people is survivorship bias. Like, the human brain is a brilliant storytelling machine. It likes to add narrative where, there isn't any. People might look like they know where they're going, but they don't. In fact, if they do, they might actively be dangerous. I certainly can't think of any politicians who are completely certain of their own genius and yet run the risk of being a potential catastrophe for themselves, their countries, and the whole world. Seneca again. Like, it is inevitable that life will not just be very short, but very miserable For those who acquire by great toil what they must keep by even greater toil. New preoccupations take the place of the old. Ambition excites only more ambition. They look not for an end to their misery, but simply change the reason for it. So Seneca's not the only philosopher I'm going to talk about this evening. This is Alan Watts. He's a British philosopher who reinterpreted a lot of Eastern wisdom for the Western world in the 60s and 70s. And he had this to say about the journey.
Because music, as an art form, is essentially playful. We say you play the piano. You don't work the piano. Why? Music differs from, say, travel. When you travel, you are trying to get somewhere. In music, though, one doesn't make the end of a composition the point of the composition. If that were so, the best conductors would be those who played fastest. And there would be composers who wrote only finales. People go to a concert just to hear one crashing chord, because that's the end. Same way in dancing. You don't aim at a particular spot in the room. That's where you should arrive. The whole point of the dancing is the dance.
So I'm bringing us back to this slide. What if this is all you have left instead? This photo is from just over 2 years ago. You might deduce a familial resemblance from our profiles. This is another photo of me and my dad, the last photo of us together. He died 2 weeks after this was taken. He was 64. He worked hard his whole life, long multi-hour commutes into London, late nights. He had recently remarried and was looking forward to his well-earned retirement. He was 64. In his eulogy, he wrote himself, he was very organized. He admitted that at lots of points in his life, he got the balance of work and life wrong. At his funeral, people came up to me and said they admired his kindness and the way he kindly looked after everybody, not the things he achieved at work. I am not trying to panic you or make myself cry in a room full of strangers. But if you do want to leave a legacy, don't expect it to be the obvious one. I guess the point here is the finale is the same for all of us. And it's not even really the journey that we should focus on, because there is one destination and there's no medal at the end of it. This is why I love Alan Watts' metaphor for the dance. Your work, the code, isn't going to be remembered, and this should be freeing in all sorts of ways. Like, at what point do you decide your life's not going to be fun? The only truly profoundly extraordinary things that most of us experience will be the only things that every human can experience. Death, love, birth, friendship. If there's no certainty, spoilers, there isn't, you can still enjoy the movement. A psychologist might call this self-actualization. Like, I dive into the flow state of programming and I love taking apart software and putting it back together. I love improving things little by little and leaving the code better than I found it. I love to lose myself in that problem-solving mind. Like, I love the dance of code, if you will. So another famous philosopher said, "For me, the purpose of life is partly to have joy. Programmers often feel joy if they can concentrate on the creative side of programming. So Ruby is designed to make programmers happy." This is Mats. He's a very nice Japanese man. He's the creator of the Ruby language, which is my preferred internet putting forms on websites tool of choice. But it's specifically designed to help get us into that delightful flow state. But that joy in the movement, momentum, can lead into all sorts of bad tech industry behaviors that you probably recognize. Now, my current gig is with a fabulous team of 8 here in Brighton, in the software arm of Propellernet, an agency some of you might have heard of. Now, one of the best habits we have as a team is regular as clockwork full team retros, which takes a couple of hours every 2 weeks. And every time the meeting comes around, I think, bloody hell, again, I just want to get some work done. We literally just had this meeting. But every time we have the meeting, we surface problems, solve issues, and understand each other better. Like, there's a variety of behaviors that cause this inside CoverageBook. There's an openness and a respect for each other, but it's that time taken for self-reflection that really shines through. Like, it gets my head out of the weeds. Plus, we have 2 office dogs, so we must be really good at coding. And my friend Sarah is right about loads of things. Whilst our code might not last forever, and no one is going to build statues of us, life is too short to be building useless things. Like the point of this, Kevin Bacon. The point of this reflection is to work out the movement you enjoy. The happiest people I know have found a way to maximize their day-to-day joys. Like, don't hustle yourself to death in search of success. We need to stop romanticizing overexertion. Like, coffee is not a food group. Like, even in a company as thoughtful as CoverageBook, we still have to avoid blurring the lines between commitment and self-endangerment. Thinking of things in terms of a journey means you're clinging to a destination, and you don't know what it will be like when you get there. And you don't even, you don't know whether you'll like it. So, one final philosopher for you from one of the 1980s greatest minds.
Yep. I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
But, I always feel like I want the whole song to go, oh. Ferris Bueller was right. Take care of your mental health so you can take care of others. Step away from your email. Go for a walk. Like, it's not news to take care of yourself, but this is your periodic reminder. Like, this should be no surprise to those of you who've seen the human thread woven through this talk. Dancing on your own can be fun. Dancing with others is a basic human joy. All the things I remember from my career are people. I don't remember the code I wrote. I don't remember when I did a particularly brilliant deploy to production. That's why I'm so pleased to be here, among you fine people giving this talk. The only dents in the universe are in those people, so let them be nice dents. Like, these are a variety of marvelous people I've worked with over the years. Like, I'm close with some of them still, some I've lost touch with. But they make up a huge proportion of the laughter and fun, and they taught me basically all of the things that I think I know. Working with them made my life better, and I hope that's true in the opposite direction. This is a quote from my friend Saran. I cannot stress this sentiment enough. And it's true if you're not a manager as well. So we've reached the part of the talk where I give you my all-encompassing theory of humanity. We are all scared and clueless, and we are at the mercy of our lizard brains. Food, stuff, your choice of JavaScript framework. Wanting people to do exactly what you say. How much in control of your inner stroppy toddler is how much of a pain in the arse you are to be around on any given day. If you need help trying to control your inner infant, just remember that everyone else is also a toddler. Yes, I am saying that some of your workmates might behave like tiny children, but hopefully not every day. You cannot peer into people's minds. You can ask what they're going through. They may tell you. They may not. You can't tell what shit people have got going on unless they choose to reveal it. Like, half the time, I don't know how I feel or why I feel it, so how are other people supposed to know? How am I meant to express it to them? We crave certainty, but nobody has it. Sarah gave an awesome talk at Brighton Ruby a couple of years ago. We've started to talk a lot about empathy in our industry, which is great. And when confronted with something obviously awful, I like to think we'd all help. But it does take more than that. Yes, I'm starting to chain quotes together now. I've got nothing else to say. This is a friend of mine, Derek. He made the point that it's what you do that counts, not what you say you want to do. So kindness is underrated, but it has outsized impact. Kind people are more fun to work with. Like, there's no such thing as right. There's only doing right by other people and feeling good about it. Like, it's easy to take out your shitty mood on the people around you. It's easy to think the other person is an idiot. It's very, very easy to communicate poorly. There is a constant battle to be the best version of you. Oh, and one more thing. There is no need. And if you do find yourself being an idiot on the internet, learn how to apologize properly. I am a work in progress. All I have for you is my experiences and the smart things said by other people. Like, I don't have the answers. We're all a work in progress. I've shipped a lot of websites. Not many of them are still running. The last couple of years have been better, but I've laughed hard and I've been pulled along by marvelous people. And I've tried to pull along others with me. So what we often think is the work isn't the work at all. Looking for the certainty in code, in the software you write, or the things you build can distract you from the enjoyment of the dance. And in the midst of all that technology, all that code and the bustle of the everyday, you shouldn't lose sight of your own happiness or the real legacy that you leave, which is the legacy of the people that you work with. And with that, I'll leave you, as I have a bunch of pixel hours to fill with life and other people. Thank you very much.